Section 3.8, we start looking at constructing parallel and perpendicular lines. The first one that we will look at is constructing parallel lines. So if we're going to construct a parallel line, we have to start with a line that we want to make another one parallel to. So notice I have changed some of this, the first step, so you may want to adjust your note sheet as well. So the first step I now have is to draw, or I should say, construct with your straight edge a line that goes through the point N and intersects the original line that we were trying to construct a parallel line to. So this point N is only labeled point N just for these directions, these steps to make sense. You may have to label your construction differently based on whatever the problem is having you do. So after we have these two intersecting lines, now we will take our compass and we're going to construct congruent angles. So the angle that's created by these two intersecting lines is the one that I need to create a congruent angle to it. So I follow the steps that we covered previously earlier in the year, making the same size arc in both angles, opening the compass to the width of this arc in the original angle, moving the compass up here with that same setting, making an arc that intersects the first one. So now, if we take our straight edge again, we should, if we connect the intersection of our two arcs and the original point N that we had on the line that we first drew, we should have a line that is parallel to the original line. In this case, we're naming that line line M. So really, constructing parallel lines is just using the construction that you already know for congruent angles. But why, if we make those two congruent angles, does that guarantee us that lines L and M are parallel? Just give me a reason. It does not have to be a full written out explanation. Us constructing two congruent angles is using the converse of the corresponding angles postulate, guaranteeing that we have parallel lines. So now, since we have covered how to construct parallel lines, you may be asked to construct certain shapes with these properties, parallel properties, or later on perpendicular, once we've talked about those constructions. So here we've got a couple of segments that are given lengths A and B. So our job is to construct a quadrilateral that has one pair of parallel sides. Those parallel sides one has to be length A and one has to be length B. Notice down about middle of your screen, we're given a specific name for that quadrilateral, and we're given specifically which segments of that quadrilateral should be which length and which segments should be parallel. So to start this, I've given you steps. These steps will be what you have to determine later on when you start doing this yourself. So if I have to first construct segment AZ that has length A, so that's just a congruent segments construction. So I start out with my ray. Then I'll take my compass. And I will move it up to segment A. And I will open it so that it is that length of that segment. Bring that back down to my new ray that I've drawn, and I draw an arc. So now this segment is segment AZ. So I can label that point A, I can label that point Z. Now I need to make my other parallel line. So that means we have to just pick any point randomly as long as it's not on AZ. In this case, we're going to call it B, so that we have our name of our quadrilateral in the end correct. So I'm going to draw a ray from point A through point B. And now it's time for me to construct the parallel line. Time for me to construct the parallel line using my congruent angles construction. So here we have an arc through the original angle, use the same setting, create an arc at the new point, open your compass to the width of the angle, so now if done correctly, we should be able to use our straight edge and draw a line that is parallel to the original. Now this is not perfect for me, so I can adjust it because of the computer only letting me use certain settings. So now we've got our two parallel lines. Last thing to do is finish off the quadrilateral by constructing the fourth side. We know that we have the length of BY that needs to be this original given length B. So I'm going to open the compass to that setting. And then I will use that setting to construct that arc. This is point Y, so I can label it as such. Over here we had point B before. I'll put it in blue so we can kind of see them stand out a little bit more. And then lastly, our job is to just take our straight edge and draw in segment YZ to close off our quadrilateral. So now I would need to see all of these markings that you see now on the screen, and I would be able to measure and see if you've in fact made the length of AZ the same as this given segment A at the top, the length of segment BY to be the same as length B at the top. I'd be able to tell whether or not you have the parallel lines constructed correctly. And I will be looking for the labeling of the vertices of that parallelogram as well. So make sure you're paying attention to the name of the parallelogram and specifically what parts are supposed to be parallel or what parts are supposed to be certain lengths. Now moving on to perpendicular lines and constructions. So there's actually two different constructions for perpendicular lines, and it all depends on whether you're making the perpendicular line go through a point that's already on the line, like in this example, or like in the next example, when the point is not on the line. So in this example, with the point being on the line, the first step is to draw two arcs equidistant from P. So that just simply means you put the point of your compass on the point P, you draw an arc on one side using whatever setting you'd like, flip your compass around and use the same setting to draw an arc on the other side of P. Now in this case, it just says label them A and B. That's only so that the directions can use those points as references. So now it says to open the compass wider. It doesn't take a lot, just slightly wider is fine. Draw an arc from point A above P. It could be below P as well. It doesn't make any difference. So we have our arc. Now we're going to use the same setting. Move our compass over here to point B. And we're going to draw another arc, again with the same setting, so that it intersects the arc that we already have here. And there we go. Now all that's left to do is draw, in this case, line CP. I am given a specific line and name for that line to draw. So I need to take my straight edge and I need to draw the perpendicular line that would go between point P, or go from point P to the intersection of my two arcs. That doesn't look right for some reason. This is maybe this. Maybe my eyes are just playing tricks on me. So now it says that point, or this line is line CP. So somewhere on this line, notice I do have arrows on both ends. So that is needed since this is a line. Somewhere on this line I need to have point C. Doesn't matter where it is, just needs to be there so that this is now labeled line CP. It is perpendicular to that original line L. Our last new construction is constructing a perpendicular line from a point not on the line. So here, your first step is to take your compass and open it to a setting that is greater than the distance from this point to the given line. That means I need to open my compass slightly wider than the space in between them. Now I do need to check before I start drawing anything, because I need to draw an arc like this, that my pencil will hit the line two different points. I don't want to open it so wide that I miss on one of the two ends. So here I've created this arc that intersects line L twice, and for just this example, these points are labeled E and F. Now, I generally keep my setting the exact same. I move my compass down here to point E. I create another arc underneath. Keeping the same setting again, I'll move my compass over to F and make another arc that intersects. So now this intersection is going to be labeled G just for this example. And then it says, lastly, we are constructing line RG. So when I take my straight edge and I draw the line that connects point R and this intersection, point G, I have to have the arrows on both ends because it is a line. If it were a segment, I wouldn't have the arrows. If it were just a ray, I would have only one arrow, depending on which way it needs to be pointing. I can tell that from the name. So we've now constructed line RG that is perpendicular to line L. Lastly, we have an example of how we can use our perpendicular construction to create more than just perpendicular lines. Now we can actually create triangles or more specific types of different polygons. So in this case, we're supposed to construct a right triangle. So first we'll start off with a ray to base our work off of. So it says that we have to have the legs of this right triangle being length A and length B. So in this particular one, we're going to have segment BC be length A. So notice I put point B not at the end point of this original ray, but somewhere between the end point and the arrow tip. That is so it's actually easier for me to do my constructions. I don't have to worry about extending that line later on if I need it. So here I have the length A. I'm going to take that length. I'm going to move my compass so that the point is on point B, and I can construct this arc. This gives me point C. So BC is actually one of the legs of my right triangle. Now I need to make the other leg of my right triangle. Now what's going to make it a right triangle is the fact that I have the legs perpendicular to each other. So a little time-saving tip here is this length that you've already measured out for one leg of your triangle, use the same length on the other side of B to help make your perpendicular line. Then you don't have to make multiple marks. So now we're going to take our compass, move it to these two intersections of these arcs, open it slightly, make one arc from one side, move to the other side, make another arc intersecting. Now we use a straight edge to connect from that point through the intersection of the two arcs. Should be perpendicular. Now we don't know where this next point is yet because we have to use a congruent segment construction to make it that leg the right length. So we have to come over here with our compass and we have to open up to the proper length. Come back down to our construction. Starting at point B, make your arc so that you now have point D. And then lastly, you would use your straight edge to connect points D and C to close off your triangle. So as we go through and are performing these constructions and we start doing more difficult constructions, you'll be challenged to use a combination of the new constructions from this section, some older constructions that you already know from previous chapters, to create shapes that have specific characteristics. So don't be afraid to look back at those construction notes that you have from earlier in the year. Don't forget that you can always go to the YouTube playlist linked to Classroom to rewatch this video, be able to skip around a little bit more freely and help you out as you continue to learn these constructions.